All right, welcome Fantasyland to our first, I guess, visual. Dan, especially Dan. I mean, the ladies were just putting requests in to get a visual on them, and we just had to make it happen. Now we've been trying to get this going for a while now, so we're happy to to show a little visual, and we figure we bring in some pros tonight to help us out with this first episode. But Dan, before we bring the goodness in, you started talking a bit about it. You do this every year, and I mean, you have three amazing daughters that you love to brag about. You're definitely a hashtag girl dad. That's very proud of the girls that he's raised. And you're lucky enough that they still want to do things with you right at their age. And this is something you do that's super cool. And tell the listeners that might not know about it already what it is. And I want to know how COVID affects it. Like, does it change what your plans are this year?
Yeah, so we do a wilderness canoe trip every year. Usually we go with one of my old college roommates and his two daughters. So it's five girls and two dads, and that gets
really rich.
that gets a little crazy. Five girls all in the same space is like, wow. But it's a wilderness canoe trip. I mean, there is nothing up there. I mean, basically, if you don't bring it, you don't have it. There's no electricity, no toilets, no nothing. So, everything you need, you bring. And also generally no cell phone coverage or anything like that. So you're just basically out there. And it's just a fantastic trip. Normally we do it up in JD's neck of the woods in Canada, but nice. Due to the COVID, that's not happening. Also due to the COVID, my roommate and his daughters from Texas are not joining us. So, not that they're sick or anything. It's just we decided it was probably best if we don't combine families for this trip. So anyway, it'll be me and the girls. We're doing a river trip. This one's going to be pretty easy, 5 days, about 44 miles. So,
yeah, sounds easy.
only a couple mile long portages in there. So yeah, they're, I mean, these girls, they'll amaze you. I mean, they don't look like they can do it, but they get out there and they just, they start throwing on the packs and the canoes and heading down the trail. So they're fantastic campers.
That's awesome, man. I mean, my daughter's 4, so when she gets to that age, if she still wants to hang with me for that long, all at once in the middle of nowhere, I will be super happy and super proud as a dad as well. So I hope you guys have a blast, man. Everybody stays safe, and you guys come back, nice and relaxed a bit. I guess you come back.
Yeah, it's relaxed kind of trip. I mean, you're relaxing, but you're not really. It's like you go, but it's a totally different kind of go.
Yeah. It's like going to Europe on one of those like Paris trips, right? You're just running around for 3 days. Yep. So I talked a bit about tonight. We brought the guests tonight just have so much to offer that we kind of combined 2 topics because we couldn't pick. And the first one I'm going to introduce. I mean, he's been on here before. He came on. Actually, he reminded me it was last summer, which I can't believe it's been that long. But Matthew Betz, man, welcome back to the Goat District, brother.
JD, Dan, thanks so much for having me back, guys. Truly a pleasure to join you tonight. That canoe trip sounds equally awesome and mildly terrifying at the same time, Dan. So hats off to you for being able to do that. But man, that sounds awesome. And like I said, super excited to come back on the pod, join you guys, and to be on here for the first video. I mean, come on. I feel like I should have put on like a better shirt or like a different hat or something. So I apologize for that, but I am very happy to be here. Always happy to talk football with good people. So happy to be here.
You're good, man. You can't go wrong with a swoosh. You're good, man. You're good. So you brought in a pretty heavy hitter, man. I mean, this guy, from what I can see, he's like a triple threat. He's got like the voice of like a ring announcer. He's got the mustache goatee combo of like a YouTube star, right? And I mean, he knows his shit. At the end of the day, like the guy knows what he's talking about. So Matt, you brought in a heavy hitter here in Matt Oakada. Welcome to the Goat District, brother.
Thanks. The first 2 things are true. I don't know about the third one. We'll see if I actually know my stuff. But yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always fun talking football outside our own pod. And I am jealous because that is exactly my kind of trip, Dan, what you just talked about. Me and my brother-in-law did something like that in Alaska. backpacking for a week and then river rafting for a week. And same sort of thing, just camping in the middle of nowhere, slowly going down the river, and there's bald eagles on the trees, and it's the life. So have fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Nothing better.
Sounds like a blast, man. So guys, you guys have been busy since, like, Matt, since the last time you were on. You guys have been super busy. So why don't you tell the people, the few that might not know, just give them an idea what to expect if they go check out Redshirt's Fantasy Football. Since you've been on, there's been, I don't know how you want to, you've got a marriage coming up. So that's, I wanted to congratulate you on that and hope, you and the missus all the best, wish you all the best for many, many years. But why don't you tell us about this new marriage, I guess you could say, with the Ball Blast?
Yeah, there are currently two marriages happening in my life right now, which is crazy. Yeah, shout out to my fiance, man. She's so awesome. She literally sacrifices so much for me to put everything I have into what we do at Red Shirts and now with Ball Blast and the Fantasy Footballers. So she's awesome. But yes, we have a new merging of two brands, obviously Oakada, myself, and then John as well, who's not with us tonight on the show. The three of us had Red Shirts Fantasy Football. We had our own podcast, our own website, the whole nine. And our good friends, Kate and Michelle Majuk over at Ball Blast Football, have been kind of on us for a while. Like, hey, we like your brand. You guys are our good friends. We support your work. You're awesome people. Like, why don't we just do this thing together? And for a while we were like, I don't know. Like, we like our thing. You guys have your thing. Like, let's just kind of do our own. And then we sat down and looked at it and we said, look at this fantasy space. Like, there is just so much content. There's so many articles. It's so hard to put out a good product and be able to stand out. And what they're doing at Ball Blast is crazy. Like, they came out of nowhere last year and just meteoric rise into relevance, and really happy to support their work. And along the way, we were like, let's just do it. Let's go all in. Let's make it one new brand. So we are Ball Blast Football, the five of us, Oakada, myself, John, and the Majuks. We all contribute to the same website. So ballblastfootball.com is where you'll find our articles, rankings, all that kind of stuff. We brought over our writers from our staff. They still had their writers. So now we have all of our writing staff together. The content is flowing crazy. It's been awesome. But we still have our own podcast as well. So Red Shirts Dynasty Podcast. They're going to cover more redraft content. And we're going to take the Dynasty side of things and combine and collaborate on a couple different projects. So lots going on. So excited about it. It's been awesome in the last couple of weeks. Really good response from the community. So we're super excited for 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Sounds like you guys complement each other in good ways and can cover more bases. And like you said, right, the more the merrier if you guys can join forces and it's something that works. And it sounds like it does. So congratulations on that. I know I've been watching you guys on YouTube and just following the Red Shirt Pod. And you guys keep putting on a lot of good material. So for those listeners out there that might not already be subscribed, just make sure you go out there and subscribe. We're going to, kind of focus in on a recent pod that you guys put out with regards to the tight ends. And we thought, initially when I talked to you, Matthew, about coming on, you told me it had to be now, because you're getting married like next week. So we're like, it's now or never, dude, So we were like, all right, perfect. Let's get it set up. And then you guys had just talked about tight ends. And I was telling Dan, we kind of wanted to start getting into specific positions. So this kind of worked out perfect. So tonight we're going to, I guess, piggyback on what you guys just did with regards to your top 12 tight ends. And again, if anyone who hasn't checked it out, go out there and check it out. I actually tweeted out earlier. So you guys can go check that out, but a lot of good information. You said that it was based on redraft, but you guys put a lot of dynasty information in there and kind of differentiate. So we'll go over that a bit tonight. But before we do that, again, the original reason I wanted to get you on, you are the fantasy PT, right? So we got to talk injuries, right? So Dan and I just went. Sorry. Oh,
I said we have to.
Oh yeah, we have to. There you go. Right. It's all in the contract, man. The lawyers, I'm pretty sure, kind of laid all that out in the contract, right?
Absolutely.
So we're gonna start with injuries. Just we'll start on a macro level, and I'll start with you, Matthew and Matt. I guess that's how I don't know, like Okada. Is it okay if I call you Okada?
People call me Okada, so
Okay, cool.
that's the best way to go.
All right, cool. I'm gonna start calling Dan Williamson.
There you go.
I love it.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Nice. So looking at injuries in general, obviously there are some that are more serious than other, and some that are should be more worrisome to fantasy land. So if you're looking on a macro level, like what injuries would you tell fantasy land that they should actually be worried about? And look, I know there's many different types of injuries, but maybe some of the most common ones that come up where you feel, people maybe aren't sure, but they probably should be worrying about how it affects the player involved.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question because there's so many out there, right? So it's hard to kind of pinpoint it to one specific thing because each one carries a certain level of risk, and it's hard to kind of quantify all of that on this show tonight. But feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'll give you more info. Basically, the biggest thing to kind of worry about in fantasy football is recurring injuries to the same body part. So we're talking about players who have several concussions. We're talking about players who have several ankle sprains over the course of the years. We're talking about players that have several hamstring strains, those kind of things where the biggest predictor of future injury is injury history. And as long as that injury history matches the injury that's going on right now. So for example, a player that has hamstring injuries from 3 years ago that popped up again last year that are now popping up again this year, like that worries me. A player like Keenan Allen from 2 years ago or 3 years ago who had a fractured collarbone and an ACL and a lacerated kidney, people were like, stay away from Keenan Allen. He's so injury prone. Well, no, he's not. Those are so fluky. You can't correlate those together, right? They're just different body parts and different injuries. So really I think the biggest takeaway for fantasy players in general is looking at the trends and looking at, do they correlate? And if not, then you kind of can give that player a pass. And if it's been a recurring theme, you have to lock into that player and say, yes, they're more likely to suffer that injury, whatever it is.
So maybe you answered the second part of that question in your first answer is, are there injuries that maybe come up where they're not as worrisome? And is it just the frequency of it, or is it just relating to the history, or are there injuries specifically that when you hear that maybe make you cringe make you cringe less than others?
Yeah, for sure. We know the biggest thing in terms of healing timeframes and reliable healing in injuries is broken bones. So fractures generally heal very well as long as there's enough time for that player to let it recover. So classic 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the injury. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, but in general, those heal very well with minimal concern at all in the same season or even in future seasons. So that's generally a green light for me. A couple other ones too, just to kind of talk about a surgical history. Typically, I don't like players having surgeries unless they're to address soreness from a previous injury. So, for example, Marquise Hollywood Brown, coming off Liz Frank surgery from his college days, played as a rookie last year. Now he had a second surgery on his foot, and everyone might be like, oh my gosh, like that's terrible news. Well, he actually had a screw removed to be able to take away that screw from the foot, which had caused him pain. So those kind of scenarios I'm not as concerned about. And then the final one that kind of comes to mind, and just thinking about, injuries that you're not really worried about in surgery, specifically sports hernia repair surgeries generally do very, very well. Excellent rehab, excellent recovery after the surgery. So we're talking about guys like Odell Beckham. We're talking about Kareem Hunt had that last year going into the season. He held up well. Deshaun Jackson, for example. So lots of players that have that. The reliable healing there gives me confidence in that player the following season.
So I'm going to ask this question to all three of you. Matthew, if you want to start it just to kind of, piggyback on what you just gave us, are there guys that you see right now that you see an opportunity, whether it's someone that is being over or undervalued because of previous injuries? I know we can all think of those guys off top of our head, right? But are there guys that maybe you feel are a nice opportunity right now in fantasy land?
Yeah, I think the couple of guys that I just mentioned, Odell Beckham and Marquise Brown, I'm rising on quite a bit. I mean, the talent with Odell is obvious, right? We don't really need to discuss that. But the guy came out in a dysfunctional offense and still put up over 1,000 yards with Baker Mayfield taking a massive step backwards as Freddie Kitchens Kitchens, and obviously had the injury from August, literally like the first week of training camp through the entire season. And just anecdotally speaking, with the patients I see in the clinic, that injury is so painful with anything you do with your core. Well, in football, you do everything with your core, right? So it's virtually impossible to move without pain. I think there's a nice dip in Odell Beckham's value this year. I'm buying him if I can in Dynasty, and certainly in redraft. We've talked about it on our show. We're kind of all buying the bounce back here for Odell in 2020.
Nice. I like the 2 receivers. Okada, who do you have based on this injury situation right now?
I'm a big fan of Odell, so Betz stealing 2 is kind of unfair, but I will go ahead and say Darius Geis. Geis is a guy we talk about a lot on our pod as well. Pretty much anybody who has an injury history that scares a lot of people but doesn't too much scare Bet is going to get talked about a lot on our pod. And Geis is another one. ACLs, and obviously Betz can give a lot more useful information on this, but it's going to be maybe a long-term issue for their career. But the short term, the next few years, it's likely not going to be a big concern. I think Geis has a chance to finally have a healthy year and show that he's the number 1 in that offense and have a breakout campaign where maybe he's close to the RB1 range, but certainly in the RB2 range. And right now, I think people are scared enough that his price is pretty low.
Dan, we've been all over Geis in our tag team drafts that we've done, like to the point where I think in that 500 we had to be like, maybe we should look elsewhere because we keep drafting the same guy, right? So we love the Geis call. Anyone that you see right now, or Dan, or anything to add on these guys with regards to injuries and value right now?
Yeah, like you said, since we talked to Matthew, I think it was early this spring, and he was saying, yeah, he thinks Geis is a buy. I started jumping all over him in best balls, because the price is still just fantastic. And those are the kind of things I'm looking for. I got a couple that I'll throw out that I'm still, I guess, a little bit unclear on. I think I know which way I lean. The first one would be Will Fuller, who I haven't really seen any evidence that he's over his hamstring problems. But what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I was going to bring it up as a question to Betz, how he felt about hamstrings when you asked that question earlier about injuries concerning, because Betz hates hamstrings.
Hey, speaking of, I just wrote an article that came out today on Wednesday on the Fantasy Footballers website talking about why there's going to be more injuries in 2020 training camps than ever before. And it has to do with these players not really having a consistent off-season training routine. What equipment do they have access to during quarantine, et cetera, et cetera. And what we see is that anytime you have a rapid increase in the stress of a movement or intensity or frequency or any of those things or all of those things, which training camp for NFL is, it is a grind, right? It leads to increased muscular strains. The NFL did research to support this. There's research articles that support this. And 2020 is a year like no other. What a year it's been, honestly. So that is a concern, hamstrings for sure, in general. However, I will say for Will Fuller, if there was ever a year for me to be in on Will Fuller, it's this year. And I've been out every single season on Will Fuller ever since he's been in the league, and it's because of his injury history. But when you look at kind of the value, right? Every player has a certain value where I'm willing to go in on them. In Scott Fishbowl, I took him in like the 10th round or something like that. Every player has a value where it's like, okay, the risk is baked in. If it doesn't work, it's fine. And if he blows up, which Will Fuller we've seen with Deshaun Watson is extremely productive. So last season, coming off the ACL surgery, he has a history of his hamstring issues, and combining the two into one player in a season, it's just never going to be a recipe for success. We saw it last year, missed a ton of time with the hamstring injury. So to say Will Fuller's over his hamstring issues or is not at a risk of injury is incorrect. He still has the risk, but the ADP, like fantasy football players, do not know what to do with this wide receiver core. Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller are both going back-to-back in ADP, I think like 2 wide receiver spots apart, and they're both going at wide receiver 4 prices. I'm willing to take a shot on Will Fuller at that point.
Yeah, you're also willing to take a shot on Brandon Cooks at that point because he's one of the ones I would have brought up as a question mark with his concussion history.
Yeah, they're both super cheap, right? So it's like pick which one you prefer as a player and take that one, because I think both have a pretty similar risk. The only issue is with Brandon Cooks, you just can't predict if a concussion is going to occur. We do know that the longer a player has a concussion history, the more games they're going to miss when they get an injury. But, is he going to land on the turf in a funny way? Is he going to take a shot across the middle of the field? I mean, you just can't predict those kind of things. So again, both players, the risk is baked in. Deshaun Watson's a fantastic quarterback. One of these guys is going to have a good season. How lucky do you feel? Flip a coin on those two guys.
Right, exactly. Yeah, in my best balls, I've definitely been taking advantage of that low ADP on both of those guys, and taking either one or the other. Usually not both, but one or the other on just kind of making each best ball team kind of a bet on one or bet on the other type situation.
Dan, before you move on, I put a poll up on my Instagram. Go check it out at GoDistrictFF. And which wide receiver does Fantasyland prefer? And surprisingly enough, Cooks was 55% to Fuller. I prefer Fuller just because, like you said, where you guys are going, where they're going. I was trying to pull up their exact ADPs, but Matthew, you kind of nailed where the range that they're going. They're going in similar range. The reason I prefer Fuller is, for me, he's more the familiarity with Deshaun Jackson right now. Just, I mean,
yeah.
Did I just say Deshaun Jackson? Is that Deshaun Jackson? Wow, I just had a brain fart. But just like you talked about. Well, you know what I mean. Coming off this, COVID type of situation where they might not be having enough or a lot of that practice time in preseason and training camp together. So Fuller has that familiar. I can't even say that word, so I'm not going to try. You guys know what I'm trying to say. But they've built that rapport. We talk about it often on here, the rapport between a quarterback and a receiver. And Cooks is coming in a new situation. He's adapted really well where he's been. This is his fourth team now, I think, fourth offense that he's joining. So he's done well where he's been. But like you said, you've got the injury concern, and then you've got him coming into a new situation. So that's where Fuller, for me, takes the edge between the two. But I love getting Fuller because the range that he's going, I'm looking for guys that have the possibility to be that number one target in their offense. And Fuller has that opportunity, whereas other guys in that range might not necessarily have this. They're more kind of the receiver too. Situation. Okada, what's up?
Just as a note, and it's pretty hysterical because I literally just made this pick in the Scott Fishbowl as we were speaking about the Texans receivers. Randall Cobb. We saw him show up in Dallas last year and have over 800 yards. He's the guy we know is probably going to be healthy, or at least relative to those other two guys, we can trust it. There's a chance he's a 60, 70, 80 catch guy, and he's going even several rounds later than both of them. So I like snagging him too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a perfect pick. I've got a lot of, in my best balls, I've got a lot of Stills and a lot of Cobb. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll try to grab two of the Houston wide receivers, usually either Cooks or Fuller. And if I miss on them, I might try to come back and get both Cobbs and Stills. Or, I might just, if I get Cooks, I might take Stiller on one team and then Cobb on the next one or whatever. So that I'm kind of mixing and matching a little bit, but if there's a pair of them that really pop off, hopefully I'll have a few teams that have that right pair and really nail it. I mean, for the only thing I'd add is, for me with Cooks is, despite all the issues he's had with concussions, he's really only missed 2 games. So with Fuller, I'm more concerned about him missing big chunks with with a hamstring or something like that. And obviously with a concussion, as Matthew was saying, you just can't tell, it could happen at any time. But if it doesn't happen, I feel a lot better about Cook's chances of staying healthy than I do about Fuller's. But, as JD said, you've got the whole familiarity thing going as well. The rapport, as he says in his French Canadian. So,
Thanks.
Yes.
I'm actually surprised, Dan, because you did steal. Obviously Fuller's my kind of guy in this topic. But there's one guy you didn't mention. I don't know if you were going to mention him, but another receiver that I'm curious to know about. Does Fantasyland have anything to worry about other than age with regards to AJ Green? And that's a question for Matthew, I guess, to start that conversation off.
Oh, do fantasy players have anything to worry about with AJ Green outside of his age? Yes and no. So with AJ Green, it's a very tricky conversation because there's people out there who believe that he did not come back because of contract concerns last year. And I will be the first to tell you, from what I saw in his pregame warmups, and again, I don't have any information from like the Bengals or anything, but from what I saw on video, he did not look right. Still favoring his left ankle, which he had a surgery on, injured at the end of July in training camp. He had a high ankle sprain. And what took him so long to get back on the field was actually probably a cartilage injury inside the ankle joint. Anytime you have a cartilage injury on a weight-bearing joint, which obviously your ankle is, any explosive movements, jumping, cutting, sprinting, hurt like hell. So for AJ Green, it just was never really going to be a good season. He was battling that soreness, probably swelling for upwards of 2 or 3 months after the injury occurred. And we can't forget at that point too, like for AJ Green, what was the point of coming back if he's not 100%? Because he's trying to get a contract. He comes out and he plays it. Let's say he's at 75%. People are going to ask him, well, are you declining? Why are you playing bad? All those sort of things. So I think AJ Green was fine for sitting out last year. Now to say, do we have any worry about him this year from an injury perspective? I feel way better about him entering this season than I did entering last year. And it doesn't have anything to do with the ankle. Remember, he was coming off of surgery to repair ligaments in his right big toe from the year before. And I was a little bit cautious coming into last year, but now in the second season, coming off of that surgery, we can expect him to be more healthy. I'm just not sure what version of AJ Green we're going to get. We haven't seen him on a football field in over a year. Obviously it's a rookie quarterback. We talked about the COVID offseason. Who knows what that looks like in training camp. I think I'm just willing to be out on AJ Green and be wrong on him because we just don't know. He's kind of a risky pick. Depending on his ADP, I might try to grab him as like a wide receiver 4 if I can for a roster. But I think in my league, someone else is going to be more excited to draft him. And so I probably won't have a lot of him in 2020.
Anything to add, guys? Okada?
No. Feel it.
I own 0 shares of AJ Green across over 100 leagues. So yeah, I'm totally out
either. I don't think I have a share. So before we jump into the tight end situation here, is there anyone we're missing that's maybe a value or that we haven't discussed injury wise that's significant enough?
I mean, Cam Newton is certainly a point of interest right now.
Yes.
I know Betz has got articles out on that. So
yes, I certainly do. Yeah. For Cam Newton, it's difficult to discuss because short term, I think he's fine. Long term, I have massive concerns. So if you're a dynasty player, and I own Cam in a couple of leagues, the second he signed with New England, I put him on the block. I'm out on Cam in dynasty. He is a type of quarterback who is not going to play till he's 38, 39. He's not a Big Ben, a Tom Brady, a Drew Brees. It's not going to happen. Now, he's coming off of 2 shoulder surgeries in the last 2 years. Now a surgery to address a Liz Frank injury in his left foot, which he sustained in the preseason last year. So, for Cam, he'll be okay for this year. I'm just not sure what version of Cam we're going to see. Now, he's certainly motivated by the lack of contract. He certainly is excited to be on a new team after being disrespected in the offseason. So he's hungry. He's motivated. He's got the best coach in the league. There could be good things for Cam Newton this year. In redraft, I'm interested a little bit. I've got him as like a high-end quarterback too. But in Dynasty, I mean, if any owner is like super excited about this, I'm going to get out from underneath Cam right now. I think the decline is coming at some point relatively soon. So that's a long-winded way of saying I might be in on Cam this year. It depends on the format.
I picked him up in the fishbowl. I mean, I picked up Stidham way later, just in case. But you said the magic word. The dude is motivated, and he's been there before. He's been the MVP. He's been to the Super Bowl. He's done all that, and now, like you said, he's going to a good situation because he's got a coach that should know how to. I mean, we'll see, but he should know how to manage him, right? Dan, anything to add with the Cam situation?
No, I guess the only thing I'd add, I'm pretty much right with Matthew on it. I'm very concerned long term. Short term, maybe not quite as concerned, though. I do have enough short term concerns that in really deep leagues, like if you're talking a 28 round best ball or a 35 round best ball or dynasty roster, that goes 25 plus players deep, I would definitely be looking at getting Stidham for cheap right now while you can, and just get him stashed on your bench. And just leave him sitting back there and wait and see what happens this year. Anything could happen with Cam. I think Stidham is just, everybody's kind of off him right now because they're so excited about Cam. And I think now is the time then to acquire Stidham while you can.
I'm on the back end of the turn in the Scott Fishbowl, and after the Randall Cobb pick that I just told you about, I just picked Jarrett Stidham like 3 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So
Well done.
we are all on the same page here.
Well done.
Love it.
All right, let's get into the tight end, guys. Like I said, you guys put out a nice epi with regards to your top 12, and I know you based it on redraft, but it's the fishbowl time. It's that time of year, and we're starting to get into that part of the off season where more and more redraft drafts are happening. I guess maybe not yet, but people are starting to think about it. Usually after the fishbowl, so. You guys started off obviously with Kelsey. I mean, I put a little comment on there in the Instagram. I'm loving Kittle as the 101 this year. Just there's different factors there with regards to targets missing. Maybe. Oh, actually, that's a guy I didn't ask you about, Matthew. Is Deebo Samuel? That's someone I definitely want to ask you about because I'm a huge fan. I've got a lot of shares, and I actually went out and bought him. Right after the announcement, I actually sent Mike Williams for Deebo just straight up, just to kind of take advantage of the situation. So is he someone that you think Fantasyland can depend on this season, and how much of the season can they depend? Because you're hearing like, oh, week 1, but then you hear about the injury and you hear differently. So what's your stance on where Deebo is, maybe as if we have a season this year in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, we can't talk about George Kittle without talking about Deebo Samuel, so it actually pairs up perfectly. I think in Dynasty, the time to buy Deebo is right now. People are worried. They're super concerned. We've seen elite players have a Jones fracture, which is basically a break of the most lateral bone in your foot. Really common in wide receivers and tight ends. We saw it with guys like Julio Jones, Julian Edelman, Des Bryant, still went on to be so productive. So yes, if you are a fan of Deebo before this injury, you should still be a fan of Deebo after the injury. So yes, if there's an owner in your league scared, go trade for him. But in 2020 specifically, Deebo is going to be pushing week 1, no doubt about it. I don't know that he won't start week 1. He certainly could. He's looking at a timeline where he'll be ready to go sometime in late August. So if there's a little setback, or if he's maybe dealing with some soreness still, those things happen with this surgery. He might not be ready to go exactly at week 1, but even if he is active week 1, I don't think he'll be himself yet. So we're looking at a player who probably is going to take about a month to kind of get acclimated back into football-specific conditioning. So with that being said, in redraft leagues, I'm cooling quite a bit on Deebo Samuel. Certainly in Dynasty, I still love him, however.
You guys put a guy at number 3 that I like. Just he ended up ahead of Andrews. For a lot of people, Andrews is the 3 right now. Okada, I'll let you comment with Ertz. I know Dan and I are maybe a little higher on a guy like Ertz than a lot of Fantasyland because of age and Goddard and whatever else. But why don't you tell Fantasyland why he's a nice piece to own right now?
Yeah, Ertz is easily my number 3 for this year. In Dynasty, it's certainly a lot closer, but the opportunity in Philadelphia is insane for him. We talked about it on our pod. He has a very good chance to break his own tight end targets record because the wide receiver situation there between Deshaun Jackson being aged, in trouble, and oft injured, Alshon Jeffrey coming off an injury and also being all those other things pretty much, and then a host of either new guys like Marquise Goodwin or rookies like Rager. There is not a lot of reliable talent on the outside for Philadelphia, but Zach Ertz is as reliable as it gets. So Carson Wentz is going to absolutely pepper him this year. We know their relationship is great, and we also like Dallas Goedert, and I think they can both have a decent fantasy season. If they just run enough two tight end sets, they're going to have plenty of opportunity to target both these guys. I wouldn't be surprised if they're both among the top players on the team in targets and receiving production. So I love Ertz, and I'm still willing to use Goddard. They're both going to thrive. They're going to make this Philly offense run pretty much.
Dan, they've got Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz, and then Andrews and Waller. I know Fantasy Beard was a bit lower, if I remember correctly, with regards to Waller.
Yeah.
And I know I am lower than the average, I guess, right now in fantasy when it comes to Waller. Dan, what are your thoughts on the top 5 and anything anything with Waller? I know we've talked about it. I think you're higher on Waller than I am, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I was initially quite cool on Waller this year, but I've kind of warmed to it because I still think that he's going to be a big part of the offense. He still works in the area of the field that Carr prefers to target. So I think he's got a lot of things, and then he's also very obviously familiar with the offense, and we've got some rookies there in Vegas that are going to be with the COVID and shortened training camps and all that. I think they're going to be struggling to catch on, so Waller is somebody who I look at to be probably a pretty good player in the first half of the year, and then maybe fade off some later in the year as some of these other players get more acclimated to the offense, and Carr gets used to throwing to him and all that. So I think Waller has got some good value there. But if you're looking to in Dynasty, if you're not 100% sold on Waller and you're looking to move him, I would wait a few weeks into the season until like week 4, week 5, something like that, and let him get some good weeks under his belt and get people excited about him, and then flip him at that point. And I'd just like to otherwise, I'm exactly in sync with you guys on your top 5. Ertz, I fully agree, is a number 3. I love his opportunity. Just absolutely love it. I think you guys nailed it. Ertz and Goddard can both thrive in this offense. I think they're going to run a ton of 12 personnel in Philly this year. So I love it.
So without kind of going through every player on the list, because I would like to, just if time allotted, but why don't we just look at guys that maybe we are less inclined to draft or to target right now? I'm not going to say completely avoid, because look, they're the top 12. I know I'm inclined to, once I miss on those top 3, and I've mentioned it a million times, so that's why I won't go into detail, but once I miss those top 3 or 4 guys in a draft, I'm probably waiting outside of the top 12. I mean, there's guys at the end, and there's one guy you guys talked about really nicely in your episode out there in Miami that we can get to. But I'll go back to you, Okada. Who's a guy that let's start with someone that you're maybe targeting or that you really like in this top 12, maybe more than everyone else out there in Fantasyland.
Am I allowed to talk about that Miami guy? Because he is in our top 12. Okay, it's Mike Gesicki. I am a huge Mike Gesicki fan. Have been since he entered the league in the draft. Athletic beast. He is going to be, I think, will be one of those elite tight ends who wins with incredible athleticism and is just a receiving threat at all times and all over the field. And similar to a couple of these other situations we've talked about, there's not necessarily much else on that offense. Obviously, you have Devontae Parker, who finally had his 18th year breakout. Preston Williams is a guy that some people like. But outside of that, it's Mike Gesicki. And he came on strong at the end of last year. He may get some games with a rookie quarterback in Tua this year, but more likely than not, it's going to be mostly Fitzpatrick. It doesn't really matter to me. Gesicki is a beast. He has the athletic talent to dominate as a tight end. So I actually have him ranked as my tight end 8 for this year. Betz has him at 7, which is even higher than me. And in Dynasty, I think I have him a couple spots higher than that because he's young, talented. Yeah, I love him.
Matt, Betz, I'm going to go to you because I feel like Dan might steal my guy.
You get to go first, JD, before me, so I won't steal your guy.
Yeah, I absolutely love Mike Gesicki, so I'm with Okada on that one. I think for me, the one guy that I'm really interested in targeting, did you say it has to be in our top 12 that we want?
Yeah, in the range. It could be close.
Okay. All right. So this doesn't sound like a super popular opinion. For me, I have him at 14. I almost have him inside. Okada does have him inside. No one's really talking about Jack Doyle. Now, certainly he is older. He's not the sexy like second year, third year tight end like a Noah Fant, like a TJ Hawkinson, like a Mike Gesicki. But he's done it. He's proven it. We've seen it before. And in splits without another tight end to compete with, he's the dude and he produces. And now we have Phillip Rivers coming to town, who historically just peppers the tight end with targets. The wide receiver core there is not scary. We have T.Y. Hilton, who, again, injuries I'm concerned about for this season. I'm fading him everywhere. I don't have him in any place. The other pass catchers are all either Paris Campbell coming off injury from last year, we haven't seen anything, or Michael Pittman Jr., who we like in Dynasty, but what are we going to get this year? I'm not sure. Jack Doyle could legitimately be the second target in this offense. Phillip Rivers throws the ball a ton. The volume should be there. No one wants him. He's old. Like, it's just right. No one wants him. And he's such a value this year. I've been taking him in like 2 tight end leagues, or as a supplement to like maybe more of an upside player like Gesicki as a safety blanket late in drafts. I think he's in for a top 12 season.
So Dan, we actually took Doyle. Remind me, was he your tight end 3 or tight end 4 in that one startup? Was that pros versus Joes, or was that the other one?
No, that was in the hard way.
Hardways?
Yes, and we took him as our tight end 3. Just a perfect pick. And he's somebody who, in like best balls, I love pairing up with Paris Campbell, just because they're going to operate in the same area of the field. One of them's going to pop, and they're both relatively cheap. So I think it's that's a good play where you can not spend a whole lot, and you can make sure that you're probably getting a guy that's going to be right in the area of the field that Phillip Rivers is going to spend a lot of time throwing the ball to. So I love the Doyle pick there. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I was going to ask you guys who's someone outside of the 12 that you guys are targeting. I mean, I think all 4 of us would have probably mentioned Doyle, so that's perfect that you brought him up.
I can't because I have him at 9.
Oh, there you go. All right. See,
Oakada, man. That's awesome. I think he and I have the same tight end list. I don't know.
Probably.
And you guys mentioned even on your episode, I think you said, what was it, from tight end 10 to 16? You said there was a 10-point difference, I think, between those guys. So there is that range, and that's kind of where, like you talked about Gesicki. For me, Gesicki and TJ Hawk are the 2 guys I'm looking for when I'm doing drafts. And those are the 2 guys that I'm willing to invest in before they've actually hit that, that Kittle, Kelsey kind of production, because I mean, all the signs are there, the situation's there, the athletics are there, everything's there for these guys to pop, and that's what you're looking for, right? In that tight end, you don't want kind of that average guy, but Doyle gives you that nice floor. He's going to be in an offense where he's going to get targets, right? So, love the calls. Dan, I'll go back to you. Is there someone other than Doyle outside of that top 12 that you like to grab? I know, I'm not going to name guys. I'll let you go. I don't want to take your time.
All right. Well, a couple things. I mean, first and foremost, my strategy on tight ends, and this kind of tends to be either dynasty or redraft. We tend to see a ton of churn at the position, other than, like that top 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. There's kind of that handful of guys at the top that seem to be pretty consistent from year to year. And then after that, it's like, you take a look at tight ends 4 or 5 through 15, and it's completely different guys every year. And some guys will bounce around pretty far in there, like a guy might be number 5 and then he's number 14 or something like that. So, to me, if you don't get one of those top handful, then it's time to wait and just kind of see who falls, because there's nobody that I'm just really in love with in that middle range. The most of the H tight ends, the Higbees, the Hump, Henry, all the H's. Hawkinson's like the
Hurst.
one that interests me most. But you can just avoid anybody who's got a last name with H. You can just pretty much avoid, other than Hawkinson, unless they fall to you. I mean, if any of those guys fall, I'll definitely take them. But in Dynasty, I am not an ageist at tight end either. I mean, I think tight ends can produce well past the prime of like wide receivers and so forth like that. I think they kind of, it takes them a few years to get started, and I think their careers can last a few years longer. It's like you have to have that survivor bias in there. Once they kind of make it to age 29, 30, something like that, if they're still going strong, like a Jack Doyle, then I'm definitely just going to keep taking them year after year, because they're going to be cheap, because everybody out there seems to be real ageist about tight ends. They want the young guys, and they're always looking for that guy who's going to pop. While I love Hawkinson, he still hasn't popped yet. I love all his traits. Geno Smith is another one. I love all his traits. Still hasn't really popped yet, but he's a guy I'm gonna definitely take some chances on. But I'm going to pair him up with a Greg Olsen, a Tyler Eifert, a Jack Doyle, even a Blake Jarwin, guys like that I feel a little bit more confident in.
Yeah, that's the range I where I like to play. I guess you could say my picture's frozen, but you guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, cool. The Ian Thomases, John, you hit them all. Dan, the Johnnus, the Jarwins, like those are guys. If you miss on those top guys, like you talked about strategy with tight end, and again, I've talked about it often. Like I like to invest. I rather pay more, and I'm getting to that point even with receiver. Like I rather not waste time having these guys on my bench in dynasty, and I rather get the invest a bit more in that proven piece if I can get it, like those top guys where it gives you an advantage. Otherwise, I'll wait and I'll get these guys that are in the cheaper range and that still have the possibility to get, to pop, right? And that's what you're looking for. The tight end's kind of like that lottery ticket, right? If you don't already have the big guy at the top, you're trying to hit big on one of those guys in the bottom. So we're talking about value. Is there someone, Dan, in that top 12 that you favor that we haven't talked about right now?
No, there's really nobody that I favor. Again, once you get past the Ertz, Andrews, maybe Waller range, I'm only going to take them if they fall. I'm definitely in favor of getting one of those top 4 or 5 if you can. So I don't really have anything to add as far as like a particular target other than JD took my guy and Hawkinson, but that's quite all right. The one caveat, I like the Gesicki call. I love his athleticism. The one thing I want to see Gesicki prove to me, and I am still taking some Gesicki this year, but the one thing I want to see him prove to me is that he is as good of a football player as he is an athlete, because there's no question about, he's a fantastic athlete. I'm not sold on his football skills, but I'm also not sold that he's not a good football player either, if that makes any sense. So I still think that's a little bit of a toss up in my own head. But yeah, he's got those physical, tools that just, you have to take some chances on him if you're in if you're building a portfolio across dynasty leagues or best balls or whatever, even redraft, whatever the case may be. If you're into portfolio building, you've got to have some Gesicki in there.
Guys, we're talking tight ends. Dan and I talk about this on the weekly with the FFPC, myffpc.com. It's tight end premium, but they've got every kind of format you can think of, whether it's best ball, dynasty, redraft. And the redraft tournaments, I mean, you're playing for $500,000, guys, like $500,000, life-changing.
Let's go.
Wife will never, ever question the time you spend on fantasy football ever again.
That's all I'm after. I mean, the money is good.
Exactly. That's literally that's so funny. It's like I do it for the titles. No, man, I just want my wife to approve so I can move on with my life and not have to get the eye roll every time I tell her But yeah, man, the FFPC is just a ball to play on. I talk about the $500,000. There's 2 different tournaments you can buy in, the main event, and then you've got the Fantasy Football Guys Players Championship, both for $500,000, both big player tournaments. The best balls are always popping $35 starting at, and they go up in the 100 range. With regards to, or actually, what's the max, Dan, again on those best balls? Is it $1,200?
You can do a $1,250 best ball if you want. I've never done one that big, but they're out there. $250 is usually where I stop. That's plenty of dough to put on a best ball for me. But I'm really rich. Different people have different appetites, I guess. See, if I was going to do the 1250s, I'd want to do like a dozen of them or so, just because, I mean, it's real easy. Number one, the quality of competition up there is insane. But trying to do 10 or 1250s is kind of outside of the budget. So I could squeeze one of them in maybe, but doing a whole bunch of them, that would be tough. But the nice thing is, if you win, I mean, it's a big cash out. So,
yep.
And then for Dynasty guys, they've never had a league fold. There's not too many sites that can say that. They've literally never had a league fold, anywhere from $77 all the way to $55 buy-in with regards to the Dynasty League. So it's look, if you're into fantasy and you're listening to us in the middle of July, there's no reason why you're not on that site right now, myffpc.com. And if you're not on the site yet and you're listening right now and you're interested, you're curious, send me a DM or send me a message on Twitter at Go District, and I'll hook you up with a little bonus for you to sign up on the site and get yourself started with something you can use towards a best ball dynasty or redraft even. Guys, we all, whether it's for our own rosters or for this podcast or for material that you're putting out in an article, there's a lot of tools that we use. So I'm going to go around just quickly, and sometimes we skip this just because of time, but you guys do a lot out there in fantasy. And Okada, actually, I forgot. I want you to tell the people the story before you tell them the tool. I want you to forget, because I know I'll forget. So I want you to tell them the story that you told me earlier with regards to where you worked during the season.
Yeah, so I'll actually use that as a segue into my tool because I use it most there. But my job during the NFL season and part of the off season, mostly during draft season and the combine, is to work for the NFL Network as a researcher. I actually got that job because I was kind of tired of working a regular desk 9-to-5 day job, and I wanted to work in fantasy. And so I just started looking up fantasy jobs. This was 3 years ago, I think. And I found fantasy researcher position at the NFL Network, which is in LA, Culver City, about an hour from where I lived. And I was like, why the heck not? I sent in an application. I said, I've written for these fantasy sites. I'd written for almost all the major fantasy sites at that point. And I got a reply, and they basically said, well, the fantasy researcher position is filled, but we are still hiring editorial researchers, which is just general NFL Network, all our regular shows. So I was like, heck yes. Went through the application process, ended up getting the job. And it's by far the coolest thing I've ever done. I get to work on TV with football players, with Scott Hansen is a good friend of mine now. It's a really fun experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And one of the things we use there a lot, and it's the tool I'd recommend, it's for dynasty players almost exclusively. It's not going to be too helpful in redraft, but we just talked about it actually on a recent pod, which is releasing tomorrow technically, although by the time you're hearing this, it might be today. But it's contract sites. Overthecap.com or spotrac.com. Either of those sites, check them out and look into player contracts. You can see, what players are making the most money, what kind of cap hit different teams have. But most importantly, you can see, what does each player's contract look like? When is their deal up? What does their dead money look like in the next year or two? Because once you get to know how that stuff works, you can begin to learn, okay, when is a team going to be able to cut a player? When are they going to be able to trade them and give some of that money away? When is their contract going to be up and they're going to have to go to another situation? And so it gives you a lot of useful information in Dynasty to get a leg up over the competition if you can learn how to use it well.
You are speaking my language. That's one place I have been. I spend like January, February, March, and April just like glued into Spot Track, and checking out contracts and everything else, and just trying to figure out, because if you can get ahead of the curve on who you think is going to get cut and, what kinds of moves are going to be made money-wise, because if you follow the money, you're going to be able to understand the NFL a lot better. Because a lot of times even, contracts can sometimes lead to, changes in the patterns of touches and so forth like that. So, I mean, there's a ton of useful information there, and there are not a lot of people who are really tuned into it. So it in my mind, it's one of the biggest edges left out there.
Yeah, I knew Dan would be all over that. He's our resident contract guy.
Yep.
I got a little chubby on that one, I gotta say.
That's anything new you can share with our listeners with regards to a tool or trick that you have when you're doing research?
Yeah, for me, it's all about listening to at Matt Oakada on Twitter. You guys may have heard of him. He's an NFL researcher. No, just kidding. But no, Okada does bring a lot to the table and interesting stuff that he's like, hey, I heard this today. Yeah, there you go. Around the network, or I was talking to so-and-so, and it's like, well, I literally am like one of a few people that is hearing this. So Okada's got a lot of great information. Definitely follow him. And then on top of that, I am a big fan of PFF's advanced analytics, specifically the yards per route run metric. It is insane how predictive that is in success. We saw it with Mark Andrews as a rookie, came out and smashed last year. Again, he's going to smash again this year. So that specifically for me is one that I like. Hashtag not a sponsor, but I do support their work and their products, and definitely like using that for research. So big fan of that.
Dan, you got anything?
Just to, kind of add on, I know we've talked about, RotoViz has an awesome suite of tools. I'm constantly using those tools. To me, the tools alone are worth like quadruple the amount of the subscription that you have to pay. So totally worth it. Also agree on Pro Football or PFF. Sorry. I'm living old school Pro Football Focus as it used to be known, but they've got a ton of good analytics on there too. So there's a lot of things. One of the things I really like on RotoViz is they have kind of a range of outcomes app where you can take a look and see not just what's their prediction or what's a good prediction for a player, but what's a good range. What can we expect from that player? What's their worst case scenario? What's their best case scenario? Is it more likely to be, what's the shape of the curve of the range of expectations? Is it more concentrated on the high end, or is it more concentrated on the low end, or is it relatively even, or is it, one of those where it's like, yeah, they're almost for sure going to be in the middle. Their chances of high or low or very low, so you can kind of see what the risk profile for each player is. And I find that really useful as I'm building my rosters, because I can build in different, as I'm building my roster, if I see I have a lot of risky players, then I'm going to take some players that have, that good median outcome, or maybe even a high, a solid floor underneath them, to kind of just eliminate some of that risk, so that, if some of those players that I'm hoping pop end up busting, I've still got somebody who I can put in there for floor. So I find that to be a really good tool for that.
Yeah, for roster construction, right? And you guys said it. The tools at RotoViz for me are, if you're in fantasy, it's a must, especially for the price. And even DLF, like they're a site I'm on often. Our boy Addison Hayes has been really souping up their tools over there. So that's another site that, whether you're into Dynasty or not, you'll definitely benefit. They've got coaching tools where you can figure out how coaches have done at different positions, quarterback tool, that kind of thing. So a nice range of tools between those two sites, and those are definitely ones that are open on my screen. Now, we had a bunch of questions that I don't want to miss tonight, so we'll end it off with that, and I'm going to go straight to Australia. Our boy Penna at Penna 722-01182, 12-person full PPR. Who's my keeper? Guys, listen to his options: Lamar Jackson in the 4th, Miles Sanders in the 5th, CEH in the 13th, and like he says, good problems to have. And since you're Betz' tool, I'm gonna actually, that didn't come out right, but you know what I mean. I'll go to Oakada first. Sorry, man.
I'm assuming we're talking one QB here.
Yeah, he doesn't say anything about SF, so I would assume so.
That's really tough, because CEH in the 14th is likely to be a better value than Miles Sanders in the 5th, if we get out of CEH even a portion of what some people want. But the reliability of Miles Sanders plus the value of getting him in the 5th, I think is going to be the way I would go. Lamar Jackson in the 4th, that's almost where I would want to take him anyways. I'm not taking a quarterback in the first couple rounds anyways. But Miles Sanders in the 5th, which is a good 3 rounds after, I would take him easily, if not 4, if I'm in the back end of the first, feels pretty solid to me, and I know I'm getting a fringe RB1 out the gates. That'd probably be my call.
Betz, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, this is an embarrassment of riches. Honestly, you can't go wrong. I'm always late round quarterback. You just show year after year after year, it doesn't make sense. There's still all sorts of good talent on the board in the 4th round. So I'm not going to take Lamar Jackson here, even though if I was ever going to draft him, it would have to be like this. I will also agree. I'm going to take Sanders at this price as well, because while in fantasy, it's often smart to fade whatever the consensus is doing. If it's like every single person in the community is on this player, the reason I'm off of Miles Sanders right now is just because of his ADP. If he was going in the 3rd or 4th round, I would be smashing the draft button every single time. So to get him in the 5th round, I agree, is a great value. I am in on him definitely this season.
Dan, I'm not going to mention that this time last year I was, repeating over and over that Miles Sanders would be a first round draft pick. And not that he's going in the 6th or 7th spot right now, but why don't you share your thoughts on this big decision here between these three fantasy studs?
I feel attacked. Well, it probably will come as no surprise to JD, but actually I like Edwards-Helaire in the 13th here, just because of the fact that I feel like in the 5th round, I'm confident in my ability to land a good player, whereas in the 13th round, I am not nearly as confident in my ability to land a player of that caliber. And, Edwards-Helaire, at the very least, he's going to pay off that 13th round pick in spades. And if he does at all what he's capable of and what Andy Reid has talked about, he would be a smash pick in the 13th. So, for that reason, it's just kind of the fact that I've got more leverage off of that 13th round pick. I would go Helaire. I mean, I love Sanders in the 5th round. I mean, that is absolutely positively drool worthy. I mean, if it weren't for Edwards-Helaire in the 13th, I would be all over Sanders in the 5th. There's no question about it. To me, Lamar Jackson in the 4th, that's about where I would start considering taking him anyway. And, as already mentioned, it's not good strategy to be drafting a quarterback that early. Sure, you can make it work, but it's just overall, it tends to not work out as often as you think it does. So give me Helaire in the 13th.
Yeah, I thought you would go Miles, Dan. I thought I'd be like going against the grain, hot take. No, I feel the same way. I think it's either Miles or CH, but again, just kind of like using my brain over my heart. I got to go CH just because if I'm looking at their values, they're, as much as I value Sanders ahead of CH, they're not that far off that, difference between 5th and a 13th, and even Miles is actually in the 2nd round. So I mean, either one of these guys is a nice pick, but I think the value is with CEH there. Now my fellow Canadian over here, Josh Smokey Hall Nelson at TNFF at Smokey_Smokey, excuse me. He's asking, Dan, I'm going to go to you first because this is a guy that you've kind of sold me on, and I've been picking him up everywhere as like a tight end 3, tight end 4 type of lottery pick at the end of drafts. But Tyler Eifert is a guy that I just totally gave up on like years ago. I just got fed up investing, and I kind of looked up last year how he did, and the situation he's going in. So Dan, sell fantasy land on Eifert the way you did with me.
All right, so yeah, I'm touched and impressed, JD, that I finally got you on Eifert. I mean, when we started doing we just drafted a couple of dynasty startups together, JD and I, and earlier on in the first one, when I threw out kind of the possibility of grabbing Eifert late, JD was like, no chance, no way, I'm not interested at all. I'm so done with that guy. So the fact that I've even got him thinking is good. I mean, with Eifert, number one, it's the price. He's totally cheap. So, if he doesn't work out, it's no harm, no foul. What I like about him is he's reunited with Jay Gruden, who he had his best years with in Cincinnati. The lack of, experience at pass catchers in Jacksonville, they've got D.D. Westbrook, who's kind of failed to fire. You've got, why am I blanking?
TJ West
Chark.
Chark obviously is going to be great, but I'm thinking Keelan Cole. That's a guy.
Oh,
wow, we're all wrong. We're like we're just missing everything.
So Keelan Cole, he had his kind of moment in the sun, but he hasn't really done much since. Westbrook has failed to fire. We've got a rookie in Laviska Shenault. We've got Josh Oliver, who I love the talent on at tight end, but it basically had an injury wrecked 2019, and still hasn't really integrated with that offense. And then you have Jay Gruden bringing in Eifert. To me, the fact that he brought in Eifert and said, hey, I want him to man the tight end spot. I don't know how I feel about Eifert long term there, but definitely this year he's somebody who's very much interesting to me. However, what I want to find out is what Matthew thinks about him injury wise, because I think that's kind of an important consideration too.
Yeah, for me, Tyler Eifert's always been a guy that has been more unlucky than injury prone. I mean, we talked about at the start of the show, right? You look at the trends. He's had dislocated elbow, obviously lots of lower body injuries, just things that don't really add up, a concussion or two. Like it's not the presentation that you want, no doubt about it, but it's also not the type of guy where you're like, okay, this guy has torn his ACL twice and his other knee has 3 surgeries on. Like it's not that sort of player. So can Tyler Eifert be effective from an injury perspective? We saw him play 16 games last year for the first time in, was it his entire career? I think maybe it's been a while.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Wow. But regardless, like, he's not an every down player, right? What did he play like last year? Like 45% of snaps or something like that. I looked before we started recording. So for him to be on the field, that's what he needs. I think he needs that like 50% snap count target in the red zone that they don't really have. And so from that perspective, I kind of buy it. Like it's intriguing at the price, which is basically free.
Right.
Yeah, he's a guy I would take a little bite out of in a best ball league, or if I'm desperate for a tight end and if I'm buying in a dynasty league because his price is so cheap, like Dan mentioned, it doesn't even matter if he doesn't do anything. You're getting him for pennies. But in a best ball league where I can snag those touchdowns, I think there's a great chance he has 5-6 touchdowns. If his team is going to score, they're going to have to throw it to somebody to do that. So I was a huge Eifert truther every year, and he kept getting injured. And so I kind of, like JD, fell out of favor with Eifert. And last year he played 16 and wasn't super impressive, but maybe a new situation back with Gruden will help with that. So in certain places, I'd be happy to get him.
Yeah. So oh, sorry, JD. I have to point out here before we get off Eifert, and I know I need to let you talk about him too, but I was just looking at my exposure on the FFPC best balls, which, they're 28 round drafts, they're tight end premium. So there's a few things that kind of push me towards Eifert there. Just, the fact that you've got those extra rounds. So, and then how late he goes, and the fact that it's tight end premium. I have 40% exposure across my best.
Wow. There you go.
Greg Olsen and Travis Kelce are next up on my list. So that tells you about all you need to know.
Dan is practicing those very practical player ownership percentages that you're supposed to follow in best ball, Yeah.
But look, totally out the window with Eifert.
Yeah, but like you said, it's the price, right? Like in the fishbowl, he's my tight end 4, and I got him in the 20th round out of 22 rounds. Like who are you grabbing in that range? I mean, if he, like last year, he was 8 weeks, he was a top 24 tight end 2 or better, and then gave you even 3 tight end 1 week. So he's going into a situation this year where you hope this offense kind of takes a step forward a little bit. It's not the best team overall, but you would think that Minshew coming into his second season or his first full season, I guess, that this offense takes a step forward, and that Eifert can be a big part of that. I don't think Oliver is ready to necessarily come in there and challenge yet, because like you said, Dan, he was injured last year. But I thought that was a good question because we talked about the FFPC, we're talking tight ends, it fits perfectly. Now I'm going to go to a couple trades here quickly before we close this out. Ace Krikelius at Ace Crescelius, 10-team Superflex PPR. Betz, I'll go to you first. The one side is Devontae Adams, Deshaun Watson, and the 109. And the other side is DJ Moore, Matt Ryan, and 102.
Ooh, tugging at my heartstrings here with DJ Moore. I love him in Dynasty. Absolutely love him. I love him in redraft as well. But I'm going to go with the other side of this, and it's mostly because of the quarterback situation. Obviously, in Dynasty, you're looking a little bit more long-term. Matt Ryan is going to be good this year for sure. But Deshaun Watson, he'll figure it out with DeAndre Hopkins. And I think he kind of pushes this over the top. He's still so young. For me, he's a couple of tiers well above Matt Ryan in Dynasty. So for me, if this is any sort of super flex, that is the play.
That's how do you feel about it? Or Betz. Sorry, Okada. How do you feel about it? I'm getting really comfortable with your last names here, just throwing them around.
This one is honestly super tough for me. I ended up voting for the Davante Adams Watson side, but it took me a while because here's the thing. Well, first of all, I should say I am very concerned about Deshaun Watson for the next year or two at least until we see what happens with this receiving core, because DeAndre Hopkins was everything to Watson and that offense, and it is going to hurt this year to not have him there as an outlet on every single play. So I'm really down on Watson this year. I think I have him ranked outside my top 12 quarterbacks for redraft, which is insane. He's not outside my top 12 for Dynasty, but I love Matt Ryan for this year as well, and he's only 35, and I think DJ Moore is going to take that next step to be a wide receiver 1, and you get a 7 spots better rookie pick, but I still ended up going with the Adams side just because Adams is too good and Watson and Dynasty is still a hair ahead.
Dan, don't steal all my thunder, but go ahead.
All right. I'm going to take the Adams Watson side here just because I think, I do worry a little bit about Adams. He's going to lose some trade value pretty soon, but on the other hand, this is a 10-team super flex, and you got to go with the best players in a 10 team because in a 10 team you've just got to have more studs than the other teams. Every team is going to be stacked. So your job is to be more stacked than the other teams, and the Adams Watson side is what does that better for me.
Actually, that's a good point with the TED team. And like you guys, I'm actually surprised that this is so tilted on the one side. It's 68.6% on the Adams side and 31.4% on the other side. I actually took the DJ Moore side, and the way I reasoned that was, for me, just to eliminate like DJ Moore and Davante Adams, similar value for me, dynasty wise. They're top tier receivers. Obviously, there's a big difference between Deshaun Watson and Ryan, but for me, Ryan, he's still like a low QB1, even though it's dynasty, with the offense that he's in and the production he can give you. And then I'm always looking like dynasty wise, what are the values of these guys going to be moving into the season and then moving in next year? So if I'm looking at Watson, as much as I don't agree with Okada, I always look at the percentage possibility of something happening. There's a possibility that Deshaun Watson does not do well this year because of factors that you've mentioned. I don't agree with it, but it's still a possibility, right? So for me, there might be an opportunity to buy a guy like Watson at a discounted price when he is going through that struggle during the season. The big seller for me is there's a huge difference between that 102 and the 109 for me when you're talking rookies, and you're getting yourself one of these, especially in Superflex, right? You're getting your pick out of one of those top 2 running backs and one of those top 2 quarterbacks. And we talk about the importance of having studs in a 10-team league, especially. So that's kind of how I lean the DJ Moore side. I think this is actually a really close trade. And I do think Watson is the best piece in the trade. And he's definitely the side I'd want to get. But if I'm looking at these 3 pieces, that'd be my reasoning behind it. I would actually go for the other side there.
I think that's a definition of a very well-constructed trade, because when you can sit there and look at both sides and just, it's so tough to decide. That whoever put together that offer, kudos. Agreed.
So guys, this has been ton of, we could literally go on for a long time, and I know you guys got shit to do. So look, man, we appreciate you guys coming on. You guys are like we said, you're the first ones to show your faces on the GOAT District as we have tonight, and we appreciate you being patient with us and hanging out. Just remind the people where they can find all the goodness that you guys are putting out, and you guys are putting some awesome stuff. So make sure you remind them where to find you. Betz, I'll go to you first and then pass it to your boy Okada.
Yeah, for sure. Again, apologies to everyone watching this video. It can only get better from here, from Okada and my faces. So sorry about that, but super excited to join you guys tonight. Thanks so much for having us on. You can find all of my work with ballblastfootball.com. And of course, find us on the Redshirt's Dynasty podcast, a Ball Blast football production. Anywhere you get your podcast, we are there. And then also you can find me with the Fantasy Footballers. I read up their injury report section of the Ultimate Draft Kit every season. I have big news coming with them this season at some point soon, so I don't want to spoil it, but teaser, another big announcement coming with the Ballers this season. And the final one, I will be doing an injury report podcast specifically for the fantasy footballers this year. So look for that in season. Really excited about that one.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. Also check us out on social media. Redshirts at Redshirts FF Pod. We're everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel. We post all our episodes there, plus some other little things like rookie breakdowns and stuff. So check all that out. I'm at Matt Oakada on Twitter, so you can follow me there. I probably don't tweet enough, but if you tweet at me, I will tweet something back at you. I don't know how useful it'll be, but you can try.
Thanks.
Probably it'll
guys.
be a GIF.
Yeah. No, that's thanks a lot, guys. And Betz, good luck with the wedding, in a couple weeks.
Oh,
we'll have
thanks,
to get
man.
back
Appreciate
on
it.
and hear all about it.
You talk about me going on an adventure, man.
Holy crap. Forget the canoe.
Yes,
You know?
no joke.
So Dan, remind the peeps they know where to find you. Just give them a quick refresher and anything else you want to tell them before we close it out and you go out there canoeing with the girls.
So yeah, you can find me at Overhyped Sweeper. Drop the final E from Sweeper. You can probably not find me for the next week because I will be off the grid, and happily so. Enjoying some time with the kids, and just it's a great time to bond with the family and catch a few fish and just completely change my life for a few days. So looking forward to that. But when I come back, I'm going to be ready to go. Hit me up on Twitter. We can talk about anything fantasy. I've always got opinions, that's for sure.
He's the overhyped sleeper, no E on the end. Tag him, tag me at Goat District on any trades, any goodness you guys want to talk about FF wise. And wear the mask out there, guys. Be safe, be happy, and we'll check you all later.
Goat District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude.